Elena was 26 and had just begun a new chapter in her life. Living alone for the first time in a modest city apartment, she had finally landed her first real job. A steady paycheck, quiet evenings, and a growing sense of independence. But the silence in her small space often felt louder than the city outside. She missed companionship, warmth, laughter echoing through the walls. So she made a decision. It was time to adopt a puppy. She imagined a playful companion. Small, energetic, always tumbling after her slippers or barking at the mail. The kind of dog that would grow up with her, share lazy Sunday mornings and late-night snacks. She had a list of names in her phone: Milo, Teddy, Finn. All soft, youthful names to match the image in her head. That Saturday, the rain tapped steadily against her windshield as she pulled into the city shelter. Her heart fluttered with anticipation, a little nervous, a little excited. She walked in with a clear goal: adopt a puppy, start fresh, raise it from scratch. Something that would fit neatly into her life, her schedule, her future. But as she stepped past the rows of wagging tails and hopeful eyes, something unexpected tugged at her, an unshakable feeling that fate had other plans. Because sometimes the companion you need isn't the one you imagined. It's the one quietly waiting, already knowing you better than you know yourself. The shelter hit her senses all at once. The sharp tang of disinfectant mixed with the unmistakable scent of wet fur. Barking echoed off the concrete walls, a rising chorus of voices desperate to be heard. Each sound, high-pitched yelps, deep woofs, soft whines, felt like a plea for love. A young volunteer named Jess greeted Elena warmly and led her down the main hallway, where the puppies were kept. "This is where most people start," Jess said with a smile, motioning toward the row of kennels. Inside the cages, tiny dogs wagged their tails furiously, bouncing against the metal bars with giddy energy. Some barked with excitement. Others nibbled their toys or dozed in tangled piles. Elena moved from cage to cage, crouching down, whispering sweet names, searching for the one that would reach out and claim her heart. But every time she paused, something inside her stayed still. There was no spark, no sudden knowing. She had expected to feel overwhelmed by cuteness, to fall instantly in love. But instead, a strange emptiness settled in. Her smile dimmed as her eyes wandered toward the back of the shelter, where the lights were dimmer and the noise was quieter. A hallway stretched out to the left, marked Senior Wing. Few visitors seemed to glance that way. Jess noticed her lingering gaze and said gently, "We don't get many people going back there, but sometimes that's where the magic happens." Something in Elena shifted, without fully understanding why. She took a step toward the silence. In the quietest corner of the shelter, far removed from the chaos of barking and bouncing puppies, Elena saw him. An old dog, curled tightly on a worn, faded blanket that looked almost as tired as he did. His fur, once golden perhaps, was now a muted gray with patches missing along his back and legs. His body looked fragile, bony hips, stiff joints, and a noticeable limp in the way he shifted slightly at her presence. But it was his eyes that stopped her cold. Clouded with age yet impossibly alert, his gaze didn't beg or plead. It simply watched, calm, quiet, steady. There was something ancient in those eyes, as if this dog had lived a dozen lifetimes and carried every sorrow and joy inside him. He didn't bark, didn't jump up, didn't try to charm her like the others. He just stared, and in that stare, there was something hauntingly human. Elena felt it immediately, like he was reading her in return. She hadn't meant to walk that way. Her feet moved without permission, pulled by something deeper than curiosity. She reached the gate slowly, her heart thudding louder than the shelter noise behind her. And then, with the smallest motion, the old dog lifted his head. His ears twitched, his eyes softened, and his tail gave a slow, deliberate wag. Just once. Not a desperate cry for attention. Just recognition. As if he knew her. As if he'd been waiting. Jess appeared beside her, her voice softer now, as if she understood the weight of the moment unfolding. "That's Murphy," she said gently. "He's been here a long time, 12 years old. He was surrendered after his owner passed away. No one ever really stopped for him anymore. People come in wanting puppies, not this." Her words trailed off with a sigh, and Elena could hear the sadness beneath them. Murphy didn't move much, but his eyes never left Elena's. She slowly knelt down in front of the gate, reaching through the cold metal bars. He leaned forward just enough to press his head into her hand. His fur was coarse, and there were deep ridges beneath the skin where muscle had long since faded. But his touch was tender, trusting, deliberate, not desperate, just present. The moment held them both, suspended in silence while everything else seemed to fade. Barking, voices, the distant buzz of the fluorescent lights. None of it mattered. Elena felt something crack quietly inside her chest. A truth she hadn't expected. A pull that couldn't be reasoned with. She whispered more to herself than anyone else. "He's not what I came for." Her fingers trembled as they stroked the top of his head. She should have let go. Stood up, kept walking. But she couldn't. Murphy didn't nuzzle her for more. He didn't whimper or lick her hand. He simply rested there, content in the stillness, as though this meeting had already been written. It wasn't her who made the decision in that moment. It was Murphy, calm, gentle, unwavering, like he had already chosen her, like he had always known, somehow, that she was his person, and maybe she had been all along. Elena stood at the shelter's adoption counter, hands slightly trembling, heart pounding harder than she expected. Jess, flipping through a clipboard, paused and looked up at her with raised eyebrows. "Are you sure about this?" she asked carefully. "Murphy's a sweet soul, but puppies are easier. They bounce back faster. He's got arthritis, needs daily medication, special food, regular checkups. It's a lot." But Elena didn't hesitate. Her voice was soft but steady. "He needs a home. That's all." It wasn't said with pity or heroism, just quiet certainty. Jess gave her a long look, then nodded and began the paperwork. It took longer than usual. Forms for senior dog adoptions, vet agreements, medical disclosures. It was a thick stack. But through it all, Murphy sat beside Elena, calm and content. His body curled at her feet like he belonged there. He didn't fidget, didn't whine. He just waited, patient, familiar, as if he'd done this before. Sat beside someone he trusted, knowing the road ahead might be uncertain, but believing in the moment anyway. When everything was signed, Jess clipped the leash to Murphy's collar, handed it over with a gentle smile, and whispered, "Thank you." Outside, the rain was still falling, soft, steady, cleansing. Elena walked to her car and opened the passenger door. Murphy stood at her side, looking up with those wise, weathered eyes. For a second, he hesitated. Then, with effort and grace, climbed in and settled into the seat like it was his rightful place. No hesitation, no confusion, just calm acceptance. Elena slipped into the driver's seat, stealing a glance at him. He was already looking out the window, peaceful, like he'd been riding shotgun beside her for years. Like this wasn't the beginning of something new, but the continuation of something long awaited. Back at her apartment, Elena moved instinctively, preparing a space that felt more like a welcome than a setup. She laid out warm towels over a soft foam bed in the corner of her living room and placed Murphy's food and water bowls nearby. She opened a can of senior dog food with trembling hands, scooped it carefully into a clean dish, and set it down gently. Murphy, ever patient, limped toward it, gave it a sniff, and began to eat in quiet gratitude. After he finished, he explored the apartment slowly, sniffing each corner like he was memorizing it. Then, without prompting, he found her feet and lay down beside them, curling into a soft crescent, his breath steady and slow. Elena stared at him, heart full. He hadn't barked once, hadn't scratched at the door or paced with confusion. He simply accepted this place as his own. That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, watching the soft rise and fall of Murphy's chest as he snored gently at her feet. Curled up like a question mark, he looked small and fragile, yet deeply rooted, as though he'd always been there. Days turned into weeks, and Murphy quietly stitched himself into every part of her life. He followed her into the kitchen each morning, sat beside her in the bathroom while she brushed her teeth, and padded slowly to the door when the bell rang. No barking, no anxiety, just presence. It wasn't the chaos of raising a puppy. It was something else entirely. steadiness, quiet loyalty, peace, a calm she didn't know she needed until he brought it with him, without a word. It wasn't long before Murphy became more than just Elena's dog. He became part of the neighborhood. People began to recognize him during their daily routines. The mailman, who used to toss letters and leave quickly, now paused at her gate each morning to offer Murphy a biscuit. Children at the park would smile and wave when they saw him, some even running up to pet him gently. But it was the elderly who seemed to love him most. They'd sit beside him on benches, quietly resting their hands on his head, as if drawing comfort from his stillness. Murphy never rushed. He never demanded attention. But he always seemed to know who was hurting, who needed a moment of peace. A crying child, a woman sitting alone, a man lost in thought. Murphy would approach slowly, sit down beside them, and simply stay. He didn't need to be invited. He just understood. One rainy afternoon, after a terrible day at work, Elena collapsed onto her couch. She covered her face, tears hot and silent. She didn't call for Murphy, but he came anyway. For the first time ever, he climbed up onto the couch and laid his head on her chest, heavy and warm. His breath was slow. His old heart beat steadily against hers. She wrapped her arms around him, burying her face into his neck. And in that quiet, broken moment, she didn't feel alone. She felt seen, held, loved. It was the kind of comfort no words could offer. In that stillness, she finally understood what unconditional love looked like. Not loud, not flashy, just always there. Just like Murphy. 2 years passed, and Murphy had grown slower, grayer, more fragile with each passing season. His eyes remained wise, but his steps became hesitant, his naps longer. Still, he never lost that gentle presence. Every morning, he waited by the door as Elena brewed her coffee, and every night, he curled beside her chair, content just to be near. But one morning, everything was different. Elena noticed the silence before she saw him. His bed, neatly tucked in the corner, cradled his frail body. His eyes were open but distant, his breathing shallow. She knelt beside him, her heart sinking. He tried to lift his head, but couldn't. She didn't panic. She didn't cry, at least not yet. She simply wrapped him gently in his favorite blanket, the one he always dragged across the room like a child with a teddy bear, and sat beside him. Hours passed. The vet arrived quietly, understanding the weight of what was about to happen. Elena held Murphy's paw in both of hers, stroking it gently, her voice steady even as her throat tightened. She whispered stories of their first meeting, of park walks and rainy nights, of quiet mornings and tearful embraces. "You were supposed to be my dog," she whispered through tears, "but I think I was yours." Murphy's breath grew slower, softer. Then, with one final exhale, he slipped away, his head resting in her lap, the same way he had lived, with quiet dignity, silent strength, and a heart that had given her everything. She didn't let go right away. She just sat with him, wrapped in the silence of goodbye, knowing she'd been changed forever by a dog she never meant to choose, but who had chosen her.